Wasatyahala ikata Hrafnar. With you all health, I am Hrafnar. Or Raven, whichever you prefer. I own a small business called Mimir's Well, and I specialize in making drinking horns and war horns, like this one. As an example. Now, in this video, I'm just going to go over a few key points for anyone interested in drinking horns and the culture and history behind them, or how they're made. The first thing that I've noticed is that when you search online on how to make drinking horns, you will find plenty of results, plenty of videos and articles about ways in which you can make a drinking horn. However, there are a lot of things that are important to the process of making drinking horns that you just won't find very easily. For example, a ton of people will tell you that you need to cure the horn, but they won't explain what curing actually is or how it works. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain it right here and now. When you make a drinking horn, you take the raw horn and you sterilize it. And one way to do that is by boiling it. There are other ways, but that's the way I do it. You boil the horn. And then after you boil the horn, you cure it. That means that you take a high APV alcohol and you put it inside the horn. And you let it sit in that horn for a number of days. Some people say 48 hours. Some people say 3 or 4 days. I prefer to do it for 7 days. You don't have to do it that long. 48 hours should be fine. But what this does is the alcohol will actually absorb and extract any toxins, any unhealthy things that might be naturally in the horn, and thus does a deeper cleaning of the horn. It basically makes the horn food safe. That's what curing is. So for anyone who is Google searching drinking horns and how to make them, and who can't seem to find anyone who actually will answer that question, there you go. That's what curing is. Curing is not the same as sealing, but I'll discuss sealing later. Now, another thing that you'll notice is that most drinking horns that you find online are not ornate or decorative. And that's fine. However, it doesn't set the right precedent. And the thing is that a lot of the people that are presenting drinking horns, or ale horns as they're also called online, are often doing it with some form of regard or connection to Norse culture. And this is still fine, but the problem is that if you actually have thoroughly studied Norse culture and history, then you should know better than to leave the drinking horn uncarved, or uninscribed at the least. And the reason for this is because in the traditional poems that are sacred to Norse paganism, that descend from pre-Christian times in Norse culture and history, it is actually stated that specific runes, known as the ale runes, should be inscribed on the drinking horns. Now, please understand, with the way that traditional Norse culture, which includes Norse paganism, works, there isn't dogma. It's not a religious mandate that they have to do that. But if you understand the context behind it, you understand that it's presented as a good idea, a really wise thing to do within the parameters of the traditional cultural beliefs. So the context is this. In traditional Norse culture, there are these old poems that were handed down orally for a long time before they were written down around 1,000 years ago, maybe 1,200 years ago, something along those lines. And this body of poems is called the Poetic Eddas. And the Poetic Eddas basically contain the bulk of the main traditional beliefs of Norse traditional spirituality. For instance, the prophecy of Ragnarok and, things like that, the creation story, all of these things. Stories about the gods and the goddesses, etc. And in one of these poems, called Sigurdrifamal, that's the wisdom sayings of Sigurdrifa, who is a Valkyrie. That's a divine, it's a female divine being in Norse belief, kind of like a female angel, but really more like a goddess. That's something I can explain in later videos. But a Valkyrie named Sigurdrifa is the one that this poem is attributed to. So in this poem, it tells a story where the warrior Sigurdur winds up freeing her from a sleeping spell. And in return for this freeing, she repays him by teaching him many things about how to use the runes, that's the letters or the symbols that were traditionally used to write the Old Norse and other ancient Germanic languages for spiritual purposes, or what one might call magic. And in stanzas 7 through 9, she instructs him that he should learn the Ölrunur, or the ale runes, and that he should inscribe the rune Naudis on his drinking horn and cast a lauker into his ale. And more or less, these verses basically teach that it's a really good idea, if you want to protect yourself from evil or poison while drinking, that you should inscribe these runes on your drinking horns. And because of this, on every drinking horn I make and sell, I put my maker's mark on the tips of the horns, and my maker's mark is a combination of the ale runes and the rune Naudis. Now, I know that I just brought up a ton of questions, like for instance, what is Naudis, and what actually are the ale runes, and I will explain that in a later video. I mainly wanted to go over this as a basis for the fact that this is something which actually should be done, at least in regards to the actual culture and history on drinking horns. And I'll show you an example. So there's a lot of culture and history behind the drinking horn. There's a lot of spiritual significance behind the drinking horn. And so many other things about the drinking horn that it seems like most people who talk about making or using drinking horns on the internet don't seem to actually get into. I don't know if that's because people, by and large, just don't know this stuff, or if there's some other reason. But I wanted to make this video to sort of touch on those things. I'm going to end this video with one really major key point about the drinking horn. Actually, two. One is that the Norse people, or the Vikings, aren't the only people to have used drinking horns. They're not culturally significant only to one people. Drinking horns have actually been found in a wide variety of ancient cultures, including people in India, even in Africa, the Scythians. Many different cultures have used them. So, it's not just a Norse or Viking thing. But two is that within Germanic culture, which includes the Norse Viking peoples, the drinking horn is a religious item within our traditional pre-Christian belief systems. It is a sacred item. It is similar to us as a cross is to a Christian. So this should be kept in mind. If you're taking an interest in drinking horns, you should keep in mind that these are used often as a spiritual or religious talisman or sacred object by people belonging to Norse and other forms of Germanic paganism or heathendom. Thank you very much. And if you are interested in buying or commissioning any custom drinking horns from me, please comment below and let me know. Thank you so much, and have a happy day.